After 20 days of relentless bombing on Gaza, we've learned that 12,000 tons of bombs have been dropped on this tiny, tiny piece of land. When I first saw the number, I felt that most people who had never been to Gaza might not understand how insane that number is, given that Gaza is only 365 square kilometers. And to many people, 365 square kilometers doesn't mean anything if we don't visualize it. So I thought of a way to kind of contextualize the amount of damage that Israel is doing in such a tiny piece of land. Because let's be real, no one is gonna know what's 365 square kilometers without a visual or kind of like a point of reference. I immediately thought of the Vietnam War. It was the largest ever bombardment in history. When I first saw the number 12,000 tons of bombs, I immediately thought of researching how many tons of bombs were dropped by the United States in Vietnam during the Vietnam War. And before I get into it, this is by no means my way of like minimizing the suffering of Vietnamese people. I just really think that the numbers are so striking when you compare them in terms of the tons of bombs, but I in no way mean to demean the victims or minimize their suffering, because all war, all genocide, all these imperialist, colonialist wars that are waged against innocent people in the global south are horrible, and this is by no means me not respecting those victims or being like, what about this place? What about this place? Everyone is a victim when it comes to US and Western wars that are waged for different reasons that never actually make sense and are revealed to not make sense years after the damage has been done. So now that I got that out of the way, let's get into it. As I said, the US bombing of Vietnam was the largest bombardment of any country in history. The Vietnam War lasted 20 years, which is 7,300 days. I'm filming this video on day 23 of Gaza's bombings, but on day 20, we got information that 12,000 tons of bombs have been dropped on the Gaza Strip. I can guarantee you that number has gone higher in the past 3 days, but we'll work with 12,000 tons since that's what we have right now. The US dropped 5 million tons of bombs on Vietnam. Vietnam is 331,212 square kilometers, and Gaza is 365 square kilometers. If you crunch some basic numbers, you will find that the US dropped 685 tons of bombs per day on Vietnam, and the tons of bombs that Israel is dropping on Gaza is 600 tons of bombs a day, per day. Meaning that Israel is dropping 800 times of tons of bombs per square kilometer than the US dropped on Vietnam, on an area that has 67 times higher population density. Israel is dropping nearly the same number of tons of bombs per day that the US dropped on Vietnam, but Gaza is 900 times smaller than Vietnam. In both instances, whether it's the Vietnam bombings, the Gaza bombings, Iraq bombings, any bombings of people in the global south where America is involved, shows you the viciousness of these bombings and the lust for blood that imperial countries like the United States and like Israel have in exchange for resources and profits at the expense of our lives. And it's because they don't view us as humans that have a life or have dreams or have anything that we want to do or accomplish other than being bombarded nonstop and dehumanized and villainized in front of the mainstream media.